You're listening to the RN Mentor, a podcast designed to document and bring you the work and experience of some of the most influential nurses in our profession. We will be sitting down and having a discussion with the leaders of today's nursing world as they share their work, how they navigate their nursing path, and their views on the future of the profession. My name is Ali Tayeb. I am a registered nurse, United States Navy veteran, a Jonas Veterans Healthcare Scholar, and your host for the RN Mentor. Hello and welcome to another episode of the RN Mentor podcast. I'm super excited today to be joined by Dr. Jennifer Mensik Kennedy. Dr. Mensik Kennedy is a sought-after presenter and prolific author and serves as the 38th president of the American Nurses Association. In this national leadership role, Dr. Mensik Kennedy boldly advocates for the nation's 5.5 million RNs. In 2023, she was named by Modern Healthcare as one of the 100 most influential people in healthcare. Her books include Lead, Drive, and Thrive in the System and The Nurse Manager's Guide to Innovative Staffing. She co-authored Lead Like a Nurse, a nurse's step-by-step guide to transitioning to the professional nurse role, The Power of 10, and contributed a chapter to the Career Handoff, a healthcare leader's guide to knowledge and wisdom transfer across generations. Prior to her presidency, Dr. Mensik Kennedy held key leadership positions within the nursing profession, including serving as the American Nurses Association as treasurer, second vice president, and director at large. She also serves as president of the Arizona Nurses Association from 2007 to 2010. Additionally, Dr. Mensik Kennedy held the role of governor of nursing practice for the Western Institute of Nursing in 2010 to 2014. Dr. Mensik Kennedy earned a PhD from the University of Arizona College of Nursing with a focus on health systems and a minor in public administration from the Eller College of Management. She holds an MBA from the University of Phoenix and a BSN from the Washington State University. Dr. Mensik Kennedy also earned an ADN from Wenatchee Valley College North. Prior to assuming the presidency of the American Nurses Association, she was an associate clinical professor at the Oregon Health and Science University School of Nursing. Dr. Mensik Kennedy was inducted in 2014 as a fellow of the American Academy of Nursing. She has been recognized as Alumna of the Year by both University of Arizona College of Nursing and Washington State University College of Nursing. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mensik Kennedy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy individual. So I'll start with my initial first question for all my guests is, how did you get started in the world of nursing?
How did I get started in the world of nursing? So in high school, probably somewhere around ninth grade, I still wanted to be an Air Force pilot and an astronaut. That was kind of where I had been gearing up. And then something kind of changed. A few things changed, right? That didn't seem maybe as a feasible career path. And my mom was in nursing school when I was in high school. And so I saw her going to college and saw some of the courses that she was taking. And that seemed like a really good possibility, actually. And so when I was in 10th grade, I said, I'm going to be a nurse practitioner. And so, this is over 30 years ago now. And I wanted to be a nurse practitioner, and I knew I would go to the community college, become an RN. I knew I needed to do my RN to BSN and then be a nurse practitioner. And so I actually started on that, to college credits in high school so I could apply early into nursing school, and I worked as a nurse the entire time I've gone to school. So I didn't go to school or I worked full time the entire time I was going to school. And so I was in my RN to BSN program, and something struck me. I realized I did not like pathophysiology and pharmacology enough to keep going to be a nurse practitioner. But what I did realize, and I had done some leadership stuff. I had done some leadership stuff in high school. Sorry about that. I had done some leadership stuff in high school. And what I realized was in my classes in my RN to BSN, there were uh, these articles in leadership and management
Mm.
that really were fascinating to me. And the nurses had MBAs. And I had never thought like that was another, I was small town, didn't get exposed to some of this. And I'm like, well, this is fascinating, a nurse with an MBA. And so I decided I was going to switch the in trajectory and go get my MBA instead so I can really work on, because I like to work on things and fix things. I don't like to sit and complain. I want to be involved to help make those changes happen. Went and got my MBA. And as I was nearing the end of my MBA, I realized I really wanted more nursing knowledge. I really wanted to really strengthen my theory and my application. So I went and got my PhD in nursing. And of course, my minor is in public administration, which is in the business college, it's called Eller College. So I continued to build on my leadership and management while also continuing to build on my nursing knowledge and application of that. And so that's how I got there. Now, in my current role, when I was in my PhD program, I had moved to Arizona, and one of the classmates was Marla Weston, who was also getting her PhD, and she was the executive director of the Arizona Nurses Association at the time. And she looked at all of us in class, and she's like, "Are you members of the Arizona Nurses Association?" And being a fairly new nurse, I was like, "Nope, I'm not." But we all knew we needed to go join that day if we were going to spend the next few years in class. So I joined the Arizona Nurses Association and really became actually involved quite quickly. As a really great opportunity to, again, affect change and advocate for patients, advocate for nurses. Short story, that's how I got to become the president of the Arizona Nurses Association, got exposed to the national level where I could do more and run for the board, and ran for the national board. And, all these years later, now the president of the American Nurses Association.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's good that you saw, because so many nurses like just see the one pathway. And I know several nurses that actually went the MBA route. Actually, a friend of mine who we both did our bachelor's degree together reached out to me years ago and said, "Hey, what do you think? I'm thinking about doing my master's. I have an MBA option, and I have the traditional route of was like a nurse practitioner or nursing administration." And then I said, "Where are you working?" And he told me where he was working. I'm like, "Who are the people around you?" And he was surrounded by a bunch of other MBAs, right? Not nurses, but MBAs in the healthcare setting. So I said, "You may want to look at an MBA." Because in your role, I think that's what would benefit you more, unless you're looking to completely change trajectories. Which brings me to my actual question at this point. How do you think your MBA really gave you a boost as far as where you are now? And also, my second, it's two-parter. The second thing is, how do you think we need to integrate like an MBA style program into some of the leadership work that we do within academia and also outside of academia?
No, absolutely. I think, how the MBA helped me onefold. When I was in class, I was in a program that focused in healthcare management, and I was one of two nurses in my cohort. And I was kind of shocked at that. And because I was like, all these people who are wanting to get engaged in fixed healthcare, which I'm happy for. But what I saw was they didn't have that clinical experience. They didn't have the experience of what patient care looked like, what all went into patient care, and having the experience of taking care of a patient. So I realized how special it was that from a nurse perspective,
Yeah.
to have that background of how to take care of someone, but also to be able to learn more about the business perspective, because it's the business of caring. And so it's the merging of the two. Now, I think in some instances, and and it's unfortunate that sometimes nurses get seen as, well, you're a nurse, you can't do a business. And the MBA, well, was that the legitimacy. Well, I've got an MBA, so obviously you must know something, which is not unlike my PhD. One day I had no PhD, and then the next day I had a PhD, and somehow the initials created, this automatic stamp of approval about my knowledge. And so it's been able to open doors. But at the same time, I think this is the power of having some of those dual programs, an MBA, MSN, a leadership in nursing. So it's the combination of both. And I saw that I wanted more nursing experience, more nursing knowledge with my MBA, because there's so much to learn in nursing and so much to learn in business. How do we partner and put that together? And particularly for those who are in leadership or management, it's important to understand, the budgeting and the finance and the marketing and the communication. And what I loved about, particularly in my PhD program, my minor in the business college, was all of the different non-nursing theories that I got exposed to, all the different applications of different management theories and everything else. We get nursing theory, but to have other theories and say, oh my gosh, how do we pull that in and how do we incorporate these to make change happen? Was what I really like, is like we can merge all of these theories together and really start to make change look very different for healthcare.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you bring up. Now, as I'm thinking about this, was having an MBA, because nursing is sometimes very, I would say, exclusive, right? Having an MBA, did that change your relationship in any sort or fashion with colleagues that went the traditional nursing?
Nursing. I think I know I don't know if it changed. I think it would have been interesting, let me say, to say if I had not got my PhD in nursing and had ended an MBA in relationship. I
Yeah,
do see that difference between individuals who ended an MBA versus those who ended a master's in nursing
right.
in their interactions with each other. And so I can see that from the outside. And so I'm glad that I continued. And, there are people who go back and get other nursing degrees on top of it. But I think it does have a tendency, we have a tendency to then further get into our silos that way sometimes, as opposed to crossing over and sharing knowledge. Oh, you've got an MBA, can you help me in this? Oh, you've got, a master's in nursing. What can you do? And it's really about recognizing the strengths of each other. And then if we all had MBAs, or if we all had masters in nursing, for instance, that would limit, I think, our ability to affect change. And so we need to utilize everyone's strengths that they bring to the table, and see it as a positive, as opposed to headbutting.
I agree. But it's a perception from the outside world of what nursing is also, right? So I think I used to teach in several programs that had like accelerated master's programs, or an entry-level master's program, and you have the rich diversity of backgrounds that come into those, because they have degrees from like anywhere from like music and the arts to those MBAs to everything, right? So I always appreciated and I always tell the individuals, because sometimes they get the message that other backgrounds are not necessarily welcome, or academic backgrounds are not necessarily welcome. And I always tell my students, I'm like, no, bring all that stuff with you. Bring everything you have with you, because I think it makes the profession that much more powerful and rich
Absolutely.
with the thought processes. So yeah,
Absolutely.
we're very much in need of that. So thank you. I appreciate you humoring me with the MBA
Oh,
questions.
no, I actually have someone I know who had an MBA first and was in finance for 20 years and went back to be a nurse.
Mm,
And so, that was an interesting experience when she talks to me about that, because she had a hard time being considered a legitimate nurse because of her prior background, right? Because she was all
yeah.
business. And so she worked on that. And it's unfortunate. My husband's a second career nurse, but he was in construction and was a contractor,
Oh,
and then
wow.
pivoted. And so, everyone brings something. Communications, IT, utilize those skills. There are so many,
Yes.
bring it forward, and that's how you connect with other people and connect with patients. So,
Yeah. And I think that's something that we really, I think from a nursing perspective, we need to do a better job at.
mhm.
Because, if I almost want to say we allow media to portray us in a very specific role. You're in a hospital taking orders from doctors and in the background and the all that stuff that happens. And I'm like, what is going on? So yeah, my wife doesn't watch Grey's Anatomy specifically. Well, she hasn't watched Grey's Anatomy for like 10 or 12 years because
I
of
won't
me, but
watch, and I won't watch any of those. And that's a common question I get from people, is like, well, when you were a nurse, what did you do? Like,
yes, yes,
I am a
yes.
nurse. What do you mean when I was a nurse, right? I'm always a nurse. And so because they default to, if you're not in a hospital, you're not a nurse.
Right, right. Actually, I had this conversation with a colleague of mine who's a physician, and they refer to their nurse practitioner to the nurse practitioners as providers, right? I know they don't necessarily like to be called providers, but they call them providers. But I'm like, yeah, but they're nurses. They're like, yeah, but they're seeing patients. I'm like, yeah, I get that. They're still nurses.
Yep.
So at the heart of it all, regardless, it's an advanced practice of
Yep.
nursing. They're not physicians. They're not,
Well,
at
and
the end
this,
of the at the
absolutely.
end of the day, they're nurses. So because I was trying to convince them
Yep.
to engage their nurse practitioners in some nursing activities, they're like, oh, but they're providers. I'm like, yes, yes, I get that. But they're
Well,
nurses.
because if you can bill, and I was just talking to someone in a couple of years ago, this goes back to billing, right? And
Yes, yes.
you're not really doing anything unless you're the biller. And I was looking at transitional care management billing codes, and providers are billing for $50 million a year in this area, when we know it's the nurses who are doing it, but we don't see it because the nurses can't bill for it.
Right.
And if the nurses could bill for it, I think we'd have different conversations about, what that
Yes.
looks like. And this goes back to, what do nurses really do? Well, we don't know because we're not allowed to bill for everything that providers are billing on our behalf and getting credit for. So
Right.
they're getting credit for the work we do every day in every setting across the country.
That's very true. And I appreciate the fact that you bring this up. And I do have physician colleagues that acknowledge the fact that most of their work is actually accomplished by nursing, but because of the way the billing system is, we don't get to call those necessarily out. So it's quite interesting of how we're observed from that perspective, which is a great segue. I can you triggered something in my brain. Is the American Nurses Association looking at any kind of billing or anything like that for the work of nursing?
Absolutely. So what the American Nurses Association is doing is we're doing a few different things. One, we have a campaign for all nurses to get their NPI number, or National Provider Identifier. And people will say, well, I'm not billing, so I'm not going to do it. Just go get it, because this is that number that people get to take credit for. So if all 5 million of us got our number, that's one start. And there's actually places on the website. There's a video on the website that goes into detail about how you actually can enroll and get one, even if you are not billing or not going to bill to your organization. So we encourage everyone to do it. We also have a meeting, a summit coming up next month on the economic value, where we actually have hired contracted with economists, healthcare economists, to really start looking at a framework for the value of nursing, which would, it does include billing and reimbursement, whether it's acute care, in the community, long-term care, a very different perspective. And then we have the American Nurses Foundation, and they have the Reimagining Nurses campaign. And there is a subset of that that is focused around nursing value. And we've provided grants to nurses and advanced practice nurses who are looking at how do we bill for things in the community and bill for things that we may not have normally have done. And so that we can help give them the resources they need to expand, but we're looking for stuff that's scalable.
Mm,
And so, while there's a lot of regulatory, federal regulations and state level regulations involved, we've got to move the dial on some of those conversations. And so really looking at how we can do things locally, bill for services, and then also then start to get Medicaid, Medicare, and private insurances involved.
yeah, thank you. Now I know the American Nurses Association does lobbying, right? And I think a lot of that lobbying may probably be dependent on its members, because I know like the other the healthcare areas like the physicians, they have a huge lobby group, which is like that's their full-time gig. What does the structure of the American Nurses Association lobby group look like since we're talking about policies and getting stuff
Absolutely.
changed from the national level?
Yep, we have RN advocacy, or RN action, sorry. And RN Action is our GOVA site that looks at everything going on at a federal level, and we do pay attention to state level activity because sometimes that helps us to recognize where maybe there might be shifts at a local level, because oftentimes there are things we'd like to change at a federal level, but we're going to get more traction at a state level to get
Mhm.
change taken care of and done. And so there's a lot of information there about what we do, but we look at, sometimes there are things that we take forward and get sponsors and co-sponsors for. And sometimes there's things that might be the agenda of a congressman person, and they come to us and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And then we get on board and we help support it from that perspective. So it can happen a few different ways. And then our teams help to pay attention to advocacy, because I think most people think, well, it's about passing bills and getting legislation through. But what they'll tell you is, as equally true, is about making sure bad stuff doesn't go through. So how do we stop the bad stuff or change the bad stuff from continuing to happen that might be not in alignment with the ANA mission and vision? And how do we pass things through that are things that we would like? So we look at workforce development. There's the staffing ratios. There's now mandatory overtime from a bill perspective. There are faculty, increasing nurse faculty. There are workplace violence bills. There's advanced practice bills. And so the interesting thing about ANA is because we can lobby, and we represent all of nursing, we have a very diverse group of individuals with a lot of individual needs that we're trying to then oversee and make sure we represent everyone. So there's a lot of different directions we do get pulled into. And we are currently looking at surgical smoke and in the
Right.
environment. So that's another one that's come forward. So we do partner a lot too with the specialty nursing associations with those issues, and gather ground support from everyone to move forward. And I think another important piece related to our advocacy is being bipartisan. And sometimes people don't necessarily like that because not maybe everyone is in full alignment with what we need, but in the Congress and in the environment we're at and look forward to being in, unfortunately, for the next few years, we need both sides of the party. We need Democrats, Republicans, and independents to
Right.
come forward and support things, because we're not going to get anything passed if we only talk to one group or the other. And it's so important to make sure we have bipartisan support for our things, that we actually look for and garner support and co-sponsors from both sides of the aisle on all the work that we do, because that's how we make change happen. And nursing is not a political issue, right? It's not one side or the other. It affects all people. It affects everyone in the nation. And so we need to remember that we represent everyone.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. And A&A becoming bipartisan is a fairly new sort of thing. I mean, I want to say it's like 3 or 4 years old or something like
Yep.
that.
So we've always maybe been bipartisan, but maybe it didn't show for a variety. And so there's been a lot of work and conversation on what that looks like. So for instance, people can um, volunteer, when they submit their money, so they want to provide, money to the PAC.
Right.
You can designate if you want it to go to Republicans or Democrats or both,
Right.
based on the PAC's decision. So we give people the option to do what that is. We did change our presidential endorsement policy to a presidential engagement policy,
Mm.
which really means our focus is educating members and educating nurses about how each congressperson representative um, votes on issues
Yes.
that ANA says are important. So how do people vote on, women's right to choose, or on DEI, climate change, staffing, healthcare. So there's a whole variety of issues, and then we help provide the information that says, here's how they align with what we believe is our values as nurses, and let
Got
people
it.
make their own choices.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. My brain is going off again. Um, so, some bill, and I just want to, I don't know the whole story behind this. Some bill just got introduced to take DEI off the table for like schools of medicine and all that stuff. So if stuff like that comes up, what's the process, for example? If the next step is like, like, oh, now we're going to look at nursing schools and we're going to look at whatever else, like what would be the role of the ANA if something like that is getting pushed forward? Or even if it's not nursing right now, if it's medical schools, the next step is
Absolutely.
going to be like nursing. So what would the role of the ANA be in like that situation?
No, what we do is we actually write letters. So for all of those things, whether it's support or, in opposition, we actually write letters for every single one of those things, describing ANA's position, why we believe or not believe, and why this is good and why it may not be good. And
Right.
then we send those letters to whoever's sponsoring it, to, whoever we need to send them. And then oftentimes too, we'll ask our, membership. So if you've signed up in RN Action, you'll get an alert that says, hey, Congress is looking at doing X, Y, and Z. Please send a letter. And so trying to get everyone involved. And,
Yeah.
we rely on our lobbyists, to kind of watch and track. They're on site quite often having conversations with staffers, moving words around, helping to make sure that people understand, again, what nursing is and nursing does, especially with DEIB. Um, it's like we have to understand cultural uh, aspects of patients. We cannot not learn this because we're taking care of a country that, in a handful of years, couple decades, will be mostly, the minority will be white, for instance. They'll be mostly uh, people of color, and nursing doesn't represent that. We don't have that experience. We're mostly white, mostly female, and so how do we, ensure that nursing students are taught what they need to know about all the people, all the cultures, everyone, and also how do we ensure that nurses of tomorrow actually represent the communities of tomorrow and of actually communities of today, because we do not
Right.
represent our current communities.
Yeah.
And so this is a really important aspect. And when we give examples of these things, I think people understand it and see it's not an attack on anyone. And it's us making, coming to the table saying, let me explain why this is important. Let me give you an example of why it's important.
Yeah.
And you start changing some hearts and minds.
Yeah. And I appreciate your answer on this. Because I think it was my COVID years are all a blur. Like a year or two ago, that the ANA made a statement around its own role with racism in its history, which I appreciated, which was a great first step for ANA to take. And there's the report that's been since published around racism in nursing. So you also brought up that we are not currently representative of the communities that we are serving. So what is ANA currently working on, and what is it planning on doing? Because we still remain primarily white and female.
Absolutely. So there, right now there's currently an Echo Project Echo series on a second part on Project Echo series on racism. And if you go to the website, you can type in and you can be a part of the series. And those are even recorded too. We're doing a couple things. We're continuing the work on the racial reckoning, which is the statement you referred to. We recognize that our past and some of and the things that we have done that have actually harmed nurses of color, people of color, because of, not even letting, Black nurses and people of color into membership in the American Nurses Association, and how we've, what we're doing to rectify that and to fix it. And so, it is it is recognizing and working with the ethnic minority nursing associations. It's attending the NCEMA, which is the National Council of Ethnic Minority Nursing Associations, and partnering to say, we need to fix ourselves. We need to move forward. And I'm white, and so help me move us forward. Help me understand where I need to also focus, because I can come up with a lot of things, but then again, it's a white person saying, here's what we need to do. So
Right.
I need to know, as an ally, how I help make that change and where I need to make that change, and continue to make sure our organization rectifies our past to some extent by ensuring we never go there in the future, and supporting everyone. And I think allyship is vitally important. So we are also working on, allyship. So there's the
Yeah.
DEIB component, there's the ethnic minority nursing associations, but okay, how can you be an ally in any form, whether it's religion, it's ethnicity, race, gender? So really focusing in on how each person can be an ally and help to move everyone forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, the work of increasing diversity within the workforce. Uh, I know the uh, associations that represent the various minoritized populations within nursing. Um, those exist, but what is the ANA doing in conjunction or in addition to, in order to ensure our workforce becomes more diversified? Because there's so many things that impact who is coming into the profession of nursing. So what does that work look like if it exists within the American Nurses Association?
Absolutely. There's a lot of stuff that we need to start and that we need to do that has not been started officially. But part of that is working on stopping the movement towards anti-DEIB and moving,
Mm,
and really trying to stop those pieces forward. Part of that, and also it's when working with nurses and our state nurses associations locally, to look at how would they increase diversity, how they reach out to new members. And it's also, we've had conversation about, going into, not just nursing students, but how important it is to go into schools, to grade schools, middle schools, high schools, and, show people, all of who can be a nurse and what a nurse is. And I was talking to an OHSU, Oregon Health and Science University nursing student who identifies as Black, and he said, he didn't realize nursing would be an option until he saw another male Black nurse. And so it's doing those types of things to say, yes, there are people that look like this, right? It's not just white females. There are people who look like this who are nurses, because until we get out into schools early on, that's where I think we'll start to see more change, and then continuing to show the diversity and connecting with other people.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. But it's true, and one of the things I feel like now I'm pretty much saying it in every episode I record. I purposely diversify this show, this podcast, because when I share this stuff with my students, we do these reflective journals afterwards, and so many of my students, because they are very diverse, always say, "I never knew." Right? Like I could do that, or I didn't know this existed, or now I want to go get my PhD or my master's degree or whatever, because now I see someone who looks like me, right? So those, so that's always a powerful statement to hear when the students bring that up.
Yeah.
Um,
And I would add too, it's really important to have the different pathways to nursing because of this.
mm,
It's because someone may not be able to go right off the bat to get a bachelor's degree.
absolutely.
Their entry may be an ADN because they may be the first to go to college. There, for a variety of reasons, or maybe they enter as an LPN. I was actually an LPN for a year and then my RN ADN, but those are important pathways. But then making sure we provide the pathway for them to continue, whoever wants to continue, and not provide structural barriers and systemic barriers that stop them from progressing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was one of those people that initially I drank the Kool-Aid on bachelor's degree being the entry level for the profession. And then I started working with more in academia and speaking to some colleagues. I'm like, I don't know if that even makes sense for from the perspective of so many people get into the profession because it's not just the nursing piece. So many people choose nursing because it's a way for them to elevate themselves within the communities that we're living in. And entry level for everybody looks different, right? In my current role, we do a lot of workforce development, and I have MAs, LVNs,
Mhm.
CNAs, and we have pathway programs for them, or RNs and RN to BSN. So we have the entire gamut, and luckily, we have had the opportunity for some funding through HRSA and other and some philanthropy dollars that kind of I'm at an FQHC, so we're serving a very diverse population as well. So, and the workforce is very diverse as a result of it. So yeah, so I appreciate those pathway programs more and more, the more I'm exposed to it. And but I still hear the talk around bachelor's degree being the entry, and I'm like, that's just not realistic, and it's not good for the communities that we're trying to serve, and it's not good for the diversity of the population within the world of nursing. So,
How can we
um,
make it easier for progression? And you made another point too about how we also advocate, HRSA, NIH,
yeah,
um, and it's when the government wants to cut funding and
yes,
drop their budgets, we're there saying, here's what happens if you do that. And so making sure the federal government continues to fund, HRSA, NIH, at the prior levels at least, not cutting and trying to get more money every single time, so that there is money to continue these types of programs that are actually
yeah.
vitally important.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And it's always scary because sometimes because now that I'm in the role, we start looking for dollars, and you can definitely see what programs are priority based on where the dollars are at. And it's sometimes disappointing when you go and look for those dollars because so much is focused in certain areas that is not nursing. We'll just say that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I appreciate all the advocacy for those dollars because they do actually tremendously help a lot of people that are trying to go through those pathways. So very true. Um, so I have a lot of questions for you, but that's right. So from the perspective of the American Nurses Association, what are some like big buckets items for you as the fairly new president for to the organ to the ANA? What are a couple of like bucket list items that you're thinking about that you want to sort of be like that's going to be part of my legacy.
Oh, that's a good question. And it's a good question because at the end of the day, there's the pieces in which we help from a strategic plan as the board members direct the organization to go
Right.
in. But we ultimately respond to and report to the membership. The membership votes us in. They technically are our bosses. And so one of the things that's important, and we were on a membership call, is that how are we prepared and geared for millennials, Gen Z? And the funny part is millennials are 40, so we're still trying to get our hands around social media. Um, and I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm, in the middle of the baby boomer millennials. I was forgotten, so I'm okay. I moved on. But it's really is our organization ready for the Gen X or Gen Z nurses? And we have Gen Alpha who are going to start graduating high school in the next couple of years. So
Yeah.
we're so focused on millennials and Z that are we going to be ready for? And they all have a different perspective. They all have a different desire for nursing, perspective for nursing, and a perspective from membership and what they want out of the profession. And so are we ready? And how do we then engage and change the organization to embrace the organization so that we can pass it on to them
Yeah.
and pass on a fully functioning, well-oiled organization that they want to be a part of, that they are a part of. And so I think from my perspective that's the most important piece, is making sure the organization is here for everybody, not just some group of individuals, because I hear that a lot. Well, you're a bunch of administrators, which is funny. And then, of course, from the administrators, I hear, well, it's a bunch of staff nurses. And so everyone's got their own perspective of what membership and who's an ANA, but it's really important to make sure that we're the home for everybody. And that we do represent everybody. And
Yeah.
it's our diverse, it's diverse in not only color, but religion and generations. And I think to me that's a really important one. And then I would say second, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I could tell you about what I'd like to do that few people know yet, right? It's like what's on her mind, but it's the value of nursing.
Yeah.
We need to move the dial on nursing becoming visible, because we're invisible. And we do that in our current capitalist society,
Right.
with healthcare being privatized. No one sees what we do unless it's a billing code. There's something financial tied to it. And so there are bad sides to it, but there are also good sides to it. And so how do we help manage it so that we do get recognized and visibility, while we, hopefully, manage the bad potentials that could come from reimbursement and the value of nursing.
Yeah. Very true. Now you touched on something with membership. Because and I don't know. I think the last time I heard the membership of the at the ANA was around 400 plus thousand, right? But there's, when I read your bio, I'm like, wow, like I remember a couple of years ago it was like 3 million, and then it was 4 million, but now it's like 5.5 million. How do we, what is there a strategy to increase membership? Because I think the more membership, the more powerful the organization. But is there a plan to increase membership? And there's people out there that would not join if you gave them the dollars to join. So with that in mind, is there a plan?
We have many plans. And one plan is a project we call Project MZ, which is Project Millennial Zers. And we have been engaging groups of millennials and Zers into and saying, okay, how do we change and what do we do and what are you looking for? And we're taking the recommendations very seriously and we're working on it. We just came from a 2-hour, the board and some staff came from a 2-hour presentation from Sarah Sladek, actually. And Sarah has written the book Member Shift, and really understanding, she studied membership and studied some of these things, and helping us to continue to say, okay, what is it that we're doing? How are we changing? And I think that the fascinating thing is where I've been on the ANA board on and off since 2010. And in 2010, so 14 years ago, I was the youngest board member.
Mm,
And I was the youngest board member at the age of 30, somewhere in my 30s.
right.
But now, since then, as we've shifted, half the board are millennials or younger, right? And so we're seeing people engaged, and it has been the work that we've been doing to change what people think of us as a bunch of old-haired white women with a bunch of pearls. And so, and it's working in the fact that, we've got board members in their 20s now, and many board members between their 30s and 20s and 30s. And so what we're doing is working, which is exciting, but then we need to make sure, we continue to work on, we are starting to think about, Gen Alpha? Like, what does that look like, and who are these individuals? And then looking at the value, of course, that we provide. Some people, don't even have never even heard of the American Nurses Association. And I think one of the big takeaways is oftentimes people don't join an organization because no one invited them.
Mm.
And so going back to, okay, how do we go back and invite people? There used to be a time when, this is generational too, of course, but, if you were a faculty member, you told all of your students they needed to join the American Nurses Association, when you graduated and you became an RN. And somewhere in our history, we've gotten away from faculty doing that. And so that was almost the first invite, right? Is like, I'm going to invite you into this association. And there's a lot of associations to join. You got I'm also a member of AONL. So it's my specialty organization. And ANA is the large one. And then, we have organizational affiliates, and we have 40 of them who are actually organizational members per se of ANA, and it's all the specialty nursing associations because there is so many choices for nurses. But the one thing that we have is that our issues that we advocate go across all specialties, and there's many specialty organizations that don't have the legal structure to lobby, and we have the legal structure to lobby on behalf of those things, so we can do that legally. So that's the nice part. So it's really about, what does ANA do, where does the value, and then inviting people to be a member. So I would put a plug in here. If you're not a member of the American Nurses Association, please join. Or I'm inviting you to be a member. And when you become a member, you're also a member of your state association, which is important because one thing I'll say is that to me, there's a threat at the state level. We have governors in different states, going against DEIB, removing stuff. We have governors weakening the State Board of Nursing, which is a bad thing.
Yes.
There's one state where the governor and some legislators are trying to allow anyone to sit for an RN exam and to be an RN. So if you were, for instance, a foreign educated physician, you only needed 2 nursing classes, and then you could sit for the NCLEX, right?
Wow.
So if we don't have nurses within the state watching these types of things and paying attention, because ANA stays at a federal level, we need nurses at the state level. Like, this is that's your scope of practice right there. This is what makes a nurse a nurse. And so advocating at the state level is vitally important. So it's important we have nurses at every level working on stuff.
Yeah, very true. Thank you. And I would have been okay if you, told us which state those were, but
Utah on that last one.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. That's good to know. They're actually, what's happening? I think the WIN conference is in
Oh, is it?
isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, well.
This year's WIN conference is in Utah. So
Oh,
something
well,
for us to discuss.
yep.
All right. It's very interesting. Very interesting. So I don't know what my listenership is in Utah, but I need to
You're in
I need
Utah
to
right now. You need to go talk to the governor. You need to
uh,
email the governor.
yes. Maybe I need to look up my stats in Utah. Um, it really almost, I want to say, it's sometimes distressing to hear some of the things that are happening because people just simply don't know the impact or they're just trying. I don't know what they're thinking when they do.
Well, to add to that, there was a time, we had the whole Project Nightingale where we had people buy fraudulent nursing
Oh
degree.
yes.
And so a lot of that started in Florida. And prior slash in between some of that occurring, Florida, because there was a nursing shortage, thought the State Board of Nursing was taking too long to approve nursing programs and took the authority away from the State Board of Nursing in Florida to approve nursing programs. So therefore that opened up Pandora's box right there.
Oh, yeah.
And so, it's you don't think of all the implications of some of these things. So now, the Florida State Board of Nursing, the way their board is structured, it's got a different name, but they're gaining some of that oversight back when they, it's like, okay, that may have been too much of a, let's bring it back a little bit. But sometimes what you think might be a good idea is not really a good idea. And it really, again, takes the nurses in those states to kind of keep track of some of this stuff.
Absolutely. I agree. I just want to be cognizant of our time. I just have one more question. Does the ANA, and I wrote this down so I don't forget it, does the ANA have like a toolkit? If I'm a nurse and I want to speak and somebody says, so what does nursing do? Right? And I have only my experience to fall back on. Is there a toolkit for me to like talking points, or is there not, or if I go talk to one of my legislators, is there a toolkit that I can, or talking points that I need to be taking to them, or anything like that available through the ANA?
Absolutely. I believe there is, if you typed in media training, and
Okay.
and it'll provide information specific, because there's a whole host of different ways. Like a newspaper might want to interview you, or a TV channel might want to
Yeah,
interview you, which is important because nurses tend to shy away from that. Well, I'm just a nurse. And so it's really important for nurses to know you have the knowledge, you have the value. And so, type in media training and review that. And as well, if you went to RN Action, it'll help provide information there too on how you have conversations with your congressperson.
that's fantastic. And I'm going to put a plug in for American Nurses Association California because they
Yeah.
have a very robust media training, and they've been doing it for several years now. So I appreciate that. So thank you so much. Again, I know we're almost at time. Anything else you want to share before we say our goodbyes?
No, I think, I want people to know how much I appreciate every single nurse in this country and the work that everyone has done. And the work, will never be done that we need to do to take care of ourselves and to make sure, as much as you take care of patients and others, that each nurse takes care of themselves as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. We have been listening to Dr. Jennifer Mensik Kennedy, the current president for the American Nurses Association, and we will be back soon with more incredible guests with the RN Mentor podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been listening to the RN Mentor with your host, Ali Tayeb. Please don't forget to visit www.alirtayeb.com. That's www.alirtayeb.com for podcast notes and resources. And don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, I wish you fair winds and following seas.